So today we're looking at transitions, transitional words and phrases. Transitional words and phrases. As usual, I'm going to link up the resources I use in the show notes, in the video description, so you can check out the materials for yourselves and do some more work and reviewing on your own. Do some more studying, practicing, stuff like that. So we're looking at transitional words and phrases, right? And what these do, as we see in the little subheading here, these words and phrases show relationships within and between sentences. So if you have two sentences and you want to connect those sentences, you want sentence A to flow well and seamlessly into sentence B, showing the reader the relationship between these two sentences, how these two sentences relate to one another. You can use transitional words and phrases between them. And if you have one sentence and you want to make that sentence just a little bit clearer, you want to make the ideas within that single sentence flow, then you can use transitional words and phrases within that sentence. So we're going to look at examples of everything. So this is just an overview. Let's look at this little paragraph here. Transitional words and phrases connect and relate ideas, sentences, and paragraphs. So this means when we're thinking of, hi, good morning, Nez, thank you for being here. When we're thinking about transitional words and phrases, it's not just about sentences, but we can use these to connect paragraphs. This is going to come in very handy when we're writing, let's say, a persuasive or an argumentative essay, and you want those paragraphs to flow well because you want to get maximum marks for expression, organization, that sort of stuff. So back to the little paragraph here. Transitional words and phrases connect and relate ideas, sentences, and paragraphs. They assist in the logical flow of ideas as they signal the relationship between sentences and paragraphs. All right, we're going to skip the rest of it for now. We want to stay focused. And some of the more commonly used connectives, this is another word for transitional words and phrases, are listed below. So let's take a look at a few examples of transitional words and phrases and how we might be able to categorize them, how we might be able to break them up into different groups based on their function, based on what they do within the sentences. So we can signal addition of ideas. If you have an idea, A, and you want to add another idea, B, or add several other ideas, you can use transitions to make it clear to the reader, or in the case of you students, clear to your marker, your CSEC marker, that you're adding ideas, right? And you can use very basic connectives like and, also, besides, and you can, to. You can make it a little bit more advanced and add transitions like further, furthermore, moreover, in addition, right? And if you want to get pretty fancy and add an idea that is equally important to the one before, you can say of equal importance, blah, 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 right? Equally important, blah, blah, blah. These are just a couple. This isn't even the full list. This is just the tip of the iceberg. These are just a couple of transitions that you can use when you're adding points onto what you already have. When you have an idea and you want to add more to it, you can use any of these or anything like the words and phrases in this group. What if you want to signal time? What if, and this is pretty important for your story writing, your narrative writing, but also important in other types of writing, where you want to make it clear that one thing happened before something else, one thing happened after, one thing happened long after, one thing happened at the same time. How do you show the relationship between ideas in terms of when they happen? You use these kinds of transitional words and phrases. Next, A happened, next B, right? Afterward. Finally, of course, you're going to use this when you're mentioning your last idea in a list of ideas. Later, last, lastly. I'm going to try to highlight the ones that let me use a highlighter. I'm going to highlight the ideas, the words and phrases that I personally use very often. So going back to the signaling addition of ideas, I like, this is a little bit too thick, this highlighter. I like furthermore, Yeah, that's a classic. Still a little bit too thick. Oh, perfect. I like furthermore. I like moreover. I like in addition. I like equally important. So yeah, these are just some of my personal favorites. Of course, you might have different favorites, right? And if you see any of these that you like using or that you think are pretty impressive, you can just let me know in the chat which ones you enjoy reading or writing, right? When it comes to signaling time, I like subsequently. This is a really fancy way of saying, this happened next. I like I like meanwhile, yeah, showing that two things are happening kind of at the same time, concurrently. And you can even use meanwhile when you're showing a little bit of contrast. Boys tend to like physics. Meanwhile, girls tend to like English, right? I just made up that sentence right there, even though it might be true. So you can use meanwhile to also kind of show a little bit of a contrast between ideas. I like ultimately. I love ultimately. We can use ultimately when we want to basically say finally. It kind of means the same as finally. So ultimately it's kind of the same as finally, but ultimately just sounds a little bit more advanced. It means this is what the result is, the end result. This is what happens at the end. Ultimately the decision is yours. In the end, all things considered, when you look at A, B, C, and D, Z, the end, ultimately. So that's a pretty nice transition. Presently is a nice one as well, just reinforcing that whatever the idea is that you're mentioning is one that is current. It's a present or current idea. And I'll be showing you many examples. We'll be doing many exercises a little bit later on in the stream. But for now, I just want to make it clear what these transitional phrases and words are by giving you loads of examples of them and what their purposes are. So we're going to be using them later on. So no worries. All right, we can use transitions also to signal order or sequence. Yeah, and this one is quite similar to signaling time, but signaling time, basically, you're just telling me when each idea happened, but signaling order, you're telling me when each idea happened in relation to the other ideas, right? So they're quite similar, but not precisely the same. Common ones are, first, second, finally, hence. I like hence. Let me change the color here. I like hence. Yeah. Ooh, I love to begin with. Instead of saying first, if I have a couple of ideas to discuss, I like to begin with, to begin with. I like to begin with, to begin with. Yeah. Yeah. I like in the end as well. Quite similar to ultimately. Right. So of course I'm just highlighting the ones that I like, but any of these could be used to signal order or sequence. What about space and place? We're gonna skip this section for now. These are more prepositions that we won't be using very in the same capacity in essay writing and stuff like that. So what about signaling examples? You give an idea and now you want to give some examples. You talk about social media, for example, Facebook, Instagram. I can't think of a third social media. Oh my gosh, Snapchat, whatever. For example, might be just the most basic. For instance, if you're giving like a case of something happening, that's a good one. To illustrate is a little bit more of an explanation you're giving to it. So an example is kind of explaining or adding more clarity or insight to an idea that you mentioned before. Yeah, and you have others. What about to show results? If you want to show that one thing leads to something else or that one thing results in something else happening, then you can use these ones over here. As a result, of course, that's a pretty basic one. Hence, so, accordingly, as a consequence. I like consequently, right? Thus, since, therefore, for this reason, because of this. So these are just a few examples of transitionals that you can use to show that something leads to something else. Something causes something else to happen. What if you want to signal purpose, why something is happening, why something happened? Then you can use these over here. I don't particularly love any of these, but maybe for this purpose might be a nice one. Or you can use any of these. If you want to compare things, looking at the similarities between two different ideas, then you can use, like, or in this, I like in the same manner. I like in the same manner, and I also like similarly. Yeah. If you want to indicate contrast, looking at how things are different, then you can use but, in contrast, conversely, however, still, nevertheless, nonetheless, yet, all of these, right? Ooh, I like ironically, showing that something is ironic, something is quite unexpected. So that's a good one to throw in as well. I like the transitionals that show intensity. So you make a point, and now you're going to intensify that point. You're going to make the point even stronger. Above all, like, this is going to be the most important thing I say. Above all, blah, 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 right? Importantly, just to reiterate that this point that you're going to hear is very important. I like critically as well. And perhaps my favorite is a simple one, in fact, right? And we have transitions, of course, to summarize stuff. We usually use in summary at the end of our essays, but there are other ways to say in summary. In short is a good one. On the whole is a good one. And we often use in conclusion as well. So in conclusion as well as in summary, these are a bit cliched. We can step out of those and use others that are basically saying the same thing. Yeah. So these are just some of the transitional words and phrases. And what I want you to keep in mind, more than this long list of examples, what I really want you to remember are the different functions of transitions. What do we use transitionals to do? We use them to signify that you're adding ideas, signal time, order, or consequence, signal that you're giving examples of something. You can show the results, the purpose. You can compare and contrast with your transitions. We skipped over this one, but you can show alternatives, exceptions, and objections. So if you're writing an essay and you realize that there's a counterpoint that you want to acknowledge, or something that the opponent might be arguing, or something that you're going to say, okay, I am arguing that social media is excellent and good and great and we love it, but there are a couple of drawbacks. There are a couple of disadvantages, I will admit. So you can use things like admittedly, or I concede. I wouldn't use I concede. Never concede. Despite or granted. So yeah. All right. So those are some transitions. I'm going to leave this up here just for a second in case anyone wants to just screenshot this table right here. I'll give you 5 seconds to do a screenshot if you want this table saved in your phone. All right, bam, moving on. Here's another table. I organized this table here. Just another table showing you lots and lots and loads and tons and tons of transitions, right? Showing contrast, we have all of these down here. Addition. So basically what we just looked at, just in a slightly different visual, right? Yeah. Now, let's do a little exercise to see if we understand the purposes, the different functions of transitional words and phrases. What can we use transitional words and phrases to do?